Hello everyone, my name is Radu Koravu. George Bina could not make it this evening, so I will be your webinar's host. I invited my colleague Alex Gitianu to present the second webinar covering DITA support in oXygen. In the first part, we covered the basic DITA functionality and the basics for creating and publishing DITA with oXygen. In the second part, we will focus mainly on reuse through different DITA functionality like profiling, content references, DITA 1.2 features like content key references, as well as more advanced publishing choices. Our agenda today starts with an introduction followed by Alex's presentation. Then we will have a special question and answer section at the end, followed by a quick overview of upcoming events, webinars, and conferences. You do not need to wait until the dedicated question and answer section to ask questions. You can ask questions at any time during the webinar using the questions panel from the GoToWebinar interface. Some of my colleagues who have already joined the webinar will answer your questions. At the end, we'll go over some of the relevant questions. The most asked question is if the webinar is recorded. And yes, this webinar will be recorded, and the recording, as well as sample files used during the webinar, will be made available in a couple of days via an automated email. Before Alex will start his presentation, I would like you to answer the following two polls. Do you use oXygen? You have three questions. Yes, no, or I'm trying it right now. So you're a trial user and you have not yet decided. I'm gonna wait a couple of seconds for most of you to vote. Alright, so from what it seems, most of you are oXygen users and you probably want to know more about oXygen. So 75% of you are registered oXygen users. The second poll is, do you use DITA, which has multiple answers like yes, we use DITA including DITA 1.2, yes, but we do not yet use the DITA 1.2 features, no, but I'm considering DITA for my next project, and no. I'm gonna wait a couple of seconds for most of you to vote. It seems that most of you are using DITA 1.2, but some of you are curious about using DITA in your next project. And hopefully this presentation will be good for both situations. So I'm gonna turn the presenter role to Alex, and he will begin the presentation. After this, we'll go through some relevant questions, and you will also have the possibility to receive the questions and answers in an automated email in a couple of days.
Hello everybody, welcome, and to those of you that were also present during our first DITA related webinar, welcome back. So this is our second DITA related webinar, and first let's see a summary of the things that we will see. We will see how to create content references, followed by some profiling and conditional content. Of course, the profiling part wouldn't be completed without the conditional publishing. Next, we will see some DITA 1.2 features like the subject scheme and how to work with keys And last but not least, we will see how you can customize a transformation scenario in oXygen, which basically is the output, and how you can use a different DITA open toolkit in oXygen. In this presentation, we will continue working on the mobile user guide, the mobile phone user guide that we've begun in the first DITA webinar. But if you haven't followed that one, don't worry, that's not a requirement. Okay, so let's start by working on a task about how to insert the SIM card into the telephone. Well, normally the first step would be to remove the battery, and we have a task already created that describes how to remove the battery from the phone, followed by the actual insertion of the SIM card, and of course you have to insert the battery back on, and we also have a task that describes this procedure. So let's just create content references to the steps from these two tasks. So we'll go into our topic, and to insert a content reference in oXygen, just go on the toolbar on this insert content reference action and click it, and we will select the remove battery task, and on the left side you will notice all the elements that can be referred, basically elements that have an ID associated with them, and on the right side there's a nice preview to get an idea if you are referencing the right content or not. So before DITA 1.2 you would select the first step and insert it, and you will repeat this procedure for all the required steps. Another thing that you could do is you could go into the remove battery task and copy the step, and then just use this paste special action and paste it as a content reference. That's also an interesting way to insert content references in oXygen. But and now I have these two steps here, but a situation that could arise if you're using content references like so is that if in the future the removing the battery task changes and a new intermediate step appears, like let's say remove the safety lock, whatever that means, when you get back to the inserting the SIM card task, you will notice that this intermediate step doesn't appear, and it doesn't appear in oXygen and will not be published either. So, and to protect from this kind of situations, a new feature was added in DITA 1.2, and I'm referring to the content reference range. And using a content reference range, you're actually referring an entire interval. So you're giving the start point and the end point, and all the content between those two markers will be pulled into your topics. So instead of individually referring our two steps, let's create a content reference range. So we'll delete these two steps. We'll go on the toolbar again on the insert content reference action, and to create a content reference range we just select all the steps that we want to be contained. So or we have an alternative, we can select here the first step and use this combo box to select the last step in our range. So we click OK, and here is the referred content. And if I repeat the scenario, if I go into the referred topic and I remove this intermediate step, for example, and I return to my task, I see that it was automatically updated. And again, not only in oXygen, but also the generated output would be the right one. Okay, so now let's insert a new step saying insert the SIM card with the gold contacts facing down. And I also have a picture that describes this procedure, so I have it here in my project, so I'm just going to drag and drop to insert it. Let's also change the placement, right? And now let's add a new content reference to the steps that describe how to insert the battery. So again, on the toolbar, and we select the task about how to insert the battery. Again, we select the beginning and the end of the content range, and we've inserted a new content reference range. Okay, so I believe we are done with this task. It's time to draw some conclusions. So we've seen how to create content references in oXygen, both by actions and copy pastes, and how you can use the content reference range feature in DITA 1.2 to protect from certain time bombs. Moving forward, so I'm actually writing a user guide for a couple of phone models. And you have here, let's say we have the X1000 model, X2000 and X3000 model. And there is bound to be some changes in the content for each of these models. And some of these changes are the fact that the SIM placeholder was changed from one version to the next. I've also used color codes here so you can get a better idea about each model. You see the X2000, it's a darker gray. And also the Bluetooth feature is only available in this phone for this phone model. So this is a profiling case, and for these situations, DITA has a couple of built-in metadata attributes. I'm talking about the product, the audience, platform attributes that you can use to profile your content. And for our case, I have chosen the product attribute, obviously. And before using it, I'll go into preferences, and the fastest way to go there will be using this configure profiling condition sets action on the toolbar. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to configure the product attributes. We want to give the possible values for our case. So here we have two sections, the profiling attributes and the profiling condition sets. For now we will concentrate on the profiling attributes. Later on we will also see what the profiling condition sets are. So let's click new, and we want this profiling attribute to be used in all of our DITA document types. So we have the DITA and the DITA map. So I will use a wildcard to match both of them. And the attribute we will be using is the product attribute, like I said. And let's also give it a user-friendly name. So this is meant as the phone model. And the possible values are the X1000, the X2000, and the X3000. Okay. Okay, again. Okay, so now we've configured the profiling attribute. Let's use it. So, like I said, the placeholder for the SIM has changed between our two models. This image is for the X1000 model, so let's mark it as such. So we'll go on the contextual menu and choose the Edit Profiling Attributes action. And here are our models. And we'll just mark it as being available only from the X1000 model. And we click OK. And now let's insert a new image for our next model. Again, I'll use drag and drop from the project view. This is a smart editing feature from oXygen. I actually dropped the image in an invalid location, and it's offering me some solutions. So I actually want it in the command element. Okay. Let's also put the break here on the placement. And again, in the edit profiling attributes dialog, and we mark this image as being the one for the X2000 model. And now that we have set profiling the profiling attribute, we can very easily access it using these in-place form controls. So just click on the model, and you will be presented with this little form control to change it. So it's a lot easier to access it. Okay, so that was the first change, the SIM placeholder. The second one was the Bluetooth feature. So we'll go in the map. We have here the Bluetooth feature. And again, we'll go in the contextual menu, edit profiling attribute, and we mark the Bluetooth as being available only for the X2000 model. And here, this little blue square means that you have profiling attributes set on the topic, and if the square is hollowed like this one, it means that it inherits profiling attributes from his ancestors. Okay, so we've profiled our content. The next thing is while I'm working on a user guide for, let's say, I'm concentrating on one model, on X2000 model, I would like a stronger visual indicator that about the content that will get filtered and the content that will get published for this particular model. And to obtain this kind of feedback, I will go into the preferences again on the configure profiling condition set. And this time I will work on the profiling condition set table. And basically here I define the values that represent one of the user guides. So for example, if I'm working on the X1000 user guide, then the phone model has to be X1000, right? And just as such, if I'm working on the X2000 user guide, when the phone model is set to X2000. Okay. Okay again. And now I'll go again on this profiling conditional text icon on the toolbar, and here are my newly defined profiling condition sets, and I can just activate one of them like so. So I'm saying that I'm working from the X1000 user guide, and as you can see, the content that will not get published for this particular model will get it's being faded out both in the author area and in the data maps manager view. Right. Now, another thing that can happen while working with profiling content, particularly if you're having a lot of values and you're using multiple profiling attributes, like I said, platform or audience, is that you can get into all sort of conflict situations. Let's say, for example, that my feature to connect to a wireless headset has only been added in my latest model, the X3000. So normally I will go and profile it as such, like so. And this actually is a conflict situation because this topic will never get published, and that's because the parent topic, the Bluetooth, it's marked as being available only for the X2000 model. And to help you with this kind of situation, oXygen has added this validate and check for completeness action. Let's click it, and in it we have an option that says identify possible conflicts in profile attributes values. So let's click it and check. And we see that it has identified this particular situation, and it's saying that the X3000 profiling condition will never be effective because it's not present in the conditions from the ancestors, the Bluetooth, right? So to solve this problem, we'll go on the Bluetooth and edit its profiling attributes again and mark it as being also available for the X3000 model, like so. And we save, and let's check again. And this time the validation is successful, as you can see here in this little message on the bottom of the editor. Okay, so we've seen how to profile your content, how to make sure you avoid conflict situations. The next step would be how to achieve conditional publishing. And normally to achieve conditional publishing, you would use DITAVAL files. And I have such a file here. So a DITAVAL files look something like this. You're basically saying that you should exclude anything that has the product attribute with this value, and you can accumulate more such properties. And how you would use such a DITAVAL file? Well, again on the Data Maps Manager, we'll click on the toolbar on this configure transformation scenario, and let's say we want to produce the PDF user guide for both of our phone models. So we will duplicate it. This one is for the X2000. We will go on the Filters tab, and we will choose to use a DITAVAL file, the one that I've just presented to you, right? This one. And we click OK. And let's create another scenario for the X1000 phone. But this time let's use one of the profiling condition sets that we've just defined. So that's another alternative. So we can say that use the X1000 user guide profiling condition set. And we click, almost forgot. I want to generate them at once, so we better change the output folder. Okay, and let's run it. And now, as you can see here from this message, the first user guide is being transformed. And here is the first user guide. And here's our second user guide. And I actually need both of them. So, okay. So you should notice that in the first user guide we have the Bluetooth feature, while in the second one we don't have it. And the first user guide, if we go to the insert the SIM card topic, we see one image, and in our second we see another. So the content that we have profiled for each phone model has been published accordingly. Okay. Again, it's time to draw some conclusions. So we've seen how to profile your content in DITA, how to define and edit profiling attributes, how to define profiling condition sets, and how to use them to get visual feedback about what content will get published while you're editing it, and how you can achieve conditional publishing both by using DITAVAL files or by using the previous created profiling condition sets. And of course, we've seen how you can protect yourself from profiling values conflicts using the validate and check for completeness action in oXygen. Okay, from what we've worked with so far and what we've seen, we can draw some conclusions. For example, my mobile phone models actually can be expressed using this taxonomy. So basically I have the feature phones, which is just this X1000 model, and I have my smartphones. And in this category I have two models, the X2000 and the X3000. models. And the thing is that if I could have used this taxonomy for the product profiling attributes from the start, then I wouldn't have had that conflict when I marked the Bluetooth, um, the conflict that I've just shown you, right? Because I could have just marked the Bluetooth as being available for all of my smartphones, which it is, and in the future when a new phone version arrives, uh, it will automatically be available for that too. And to help us with this, we can use the subject scheme feature in DITA 1.2. So the subject scheme enables you to create custom control values and to manage metadata attribute values uh, without the need of creating a DITA specialization. And I have created such a subject scheme for my phone models. Let me just open it in the editor. So the subject scheme is basically a specialization of a DITA map, and what you're saying is here I'm writing a definition for the product attribute that I use as a profiling attribute, and I'm binding it to this definition, and I define here a smartphone category and with two children, the X2000 and the X3000 models, and I have another category here for the feature phones with another with just one children and X1000 model. So that's basically how a subject scheme looks like and how you create it. Well, actually, it was already created. And another thing that I can do with the subject scheme is, for example, I only intend my authors to use the product profiling attributes. So I want to forbid any other profiling attributes from being used. And here, for example, I'm forbidding the use of the platform profiling attributes by binding it to an empty subject definition. Right? Okay, so let's see how you can use the subject scheme. Well, all we have to do is go on our map and add a reference to the subject scheme. Append child from the contextual menu and map reference. And we'll select the subject scheme. And let's also specify the type. This is, you will need this type if you want to write DITAVAL files based on the taxonomy from the subject scheme. But we'll see that a bit later. So insert and close. So let's save the map. And now, if we go for the Bluetooth, if we go and edit the profiling attributes again, we will see that oXygen has automatically detected the taxonomy from the subject scheme, right? And I can just mark the Bluetooth feature as being available for all of my smartphones, like so. Let's get this filter out. Right. And another way oXygen uses the subject scheme, for example, if I validate and check for completeness again, I notice that I have two errors. Let's take a closer look at these errors. Well, the first one is that I'm using the platform profiling attributes for profiling some content, and like I've shown you in the subject scheme, I have forbidden the use of the platform attribute. So oXygen automatically uses the subject scheme to validate, to enforce these rules also. So in this case, we will just delete the platform attribute to solve this problem. And the second error is that accidentally I have profiled some content as being available for a model that is not defined in my taxonomy, right? So this again is reported as an error. And if I go to the edit profiling attributes action again, I will see this value that is being rendered differently by oXygen, right? It says that it's a value that was found in the document but not in the set of allowed values. So I'll just remove it, and I probably wanted the X2000 model, right? Okay, and now if I validate and check for completeness again, my map is again valid and complete. And of course, if you want to edit the profiling attributes directly from the attributes view, you will also be offered content completion based on the taxonomy from the subject scheme. Okay. I've also said that you can write DITAVAL files based on the taxonomy from the subject scheme. And I have such a DITAVAL file to show it to you. So this one. So you can say exclude anything that has the product attribute with the value smartphone, where smartphone is a value from the subject scheme, right? And if I change, let's say, if I change my X1000 scenario to use this DITAVAL, and we generate it again, we will notice that all the smartphone features will be filtered. You see, I have no Bluetooth. Okay. Another problem that I'm having, and for that we return to the insert sim task, is that let's assume for my next phone model, the X3000 phone model, I have a different placeholder for the SIM card. What does that mean? Well, it means I have to insert another element, and I have to profile it again for this other model. And if it's only one place where I have to make this change, then that's not that big of a deal. But imagine if I have to make this change in 20 or more places. And of course, there were some solutions in DITA 1.2, like using topic warehouses, but DITA 1.2 comes with a more elegant solution, and that's by using keys, right? So the keys are an indirect addressing mechanism, and they allow authors to create references to things without having to know exactly where or what those things are, or where will they be in the future, if they move or not. And the keys avoid the need for multiple conditional elements. Let's take our case, for example. At the map level, we will define a key association. So we'll define a key that is being mapped to the actual image. And inside the topic, we will just add a reference using that key name. So let's go to oXygen and use keys to profile the image. So first thing we have to do, we will create a new map. Let's edit its properties. So this will be the X2000 user guide. And we will add a reference to our common map. Let's save it. And next we will create a key definition. And the key definition is pretty much a topic reference, but it will not get published in the output. So we give a name for the key, insert sim, and we will select the target for our key, which is an image in this case. And let's also mark it as being a resource only in the processing roles. Let's give it a navigation title so it looks better in the Data Maps Manager view. and insert it. And now we'll go in the topic and we will delete these two profiled elements, image elements, like so. And instead we will go on the toolbar and choose the key reference action. And here we see the key we've just defined. So we'll select it and we make sure that we use an image element and we click OK. And here is the image that I've created a key for. And I have created a similar map for my other model, the X1000 model, and it also defines a key, an insert sim key, but normally to a different image. And now if I go in the topic, I see that the key is being resolved to the other image. And that brings in another concept, that of a route map. So when collecting keys, you normally start from a route map and you pass through all the submaps and you collect all the keys and you construct a key space. And by default, oXygen uses the current selected map in the DITA Maps Manager as the route map, and all the key references will be resolved in that context, in the key space created by this map. And a common scenario that can happen while working with complex data maps hierarchies is that sometimes you are concentrating on a submap, like let's say our common mobile phone data map. And if you're doing so, when you go into a topic, you'll notice this kind of errors, that the key is not found. And if you want to insert a new key, there will be no keys or not the keys that you expect. And the reason for that, like I said, is the fact that oXygen by default uses the current selected map as the route map. And to address these situations, we have added this route map combo on top of the Data Maps Manager, and you can specify the route map that oXygen should use for collecting keys. So let's set it, for example, to the X2000 model. And now if we return to the topic, we see that our image is being resolved in the context of the X2000 data map. Okay. Another interesting thing you can use keys for is to create content key references, which again are very similar with content references and content references ranges, except you are using a key to specify the start point of the interval. So you will use this conKeyRef attribute to give a key and an ID, and this key will be resolved again in the context of the route map to the actual topic, and that's how the interval is being identified. So for our case, let's assume that the procedure for removing the battery and inserting the battery have been completely changed between our two models. And let's use key definitions to create these references. So again, we'll go on the map and we will create two more key definitions. This time there will be to some topics. Okay, so this is the insert battery key definition, and let's insert another one to the remove battery. Okay, and I've already created in my other map two similar key definitions to the procedure for inserting the battery and removing the battery for the X1000 phone model. Okay, so now let's return to the topic and let's remove this content reference range and replace it with a content key reference, like so. So we'll use this other action on the toolbar to insert the content key reference, and we will select the insert theme key. We also see the remove battery key. We also see the topic where it's being resolved to, and we want to refer to steps from this topic. So we'll click on the subtopic button on the bottom, and we'll select the range that we want to refer, like so. We see that the conKeyRef and conRefEnd attributes have been updated. Click OK, and now I have a content key reference. And let's do the same for the steps about how to insert the battery. Insert battery, again we choose the subtopic, these two steps, and we have a content key reference to the steps about how to insert the battery back on. And if we go to the route map option and we change the route map and we return to the topic, we see that all of the keys and all of the content is being now resolved in the context of the X1000 map. So again, the quickest way to figure that out is from the color code of the images. So these are light gray, and these ones are darker. And this is how basically keys are used to achieve conditional publishing without any need of using profiling attributes. So all you have to do, for example right now, is to generate the documentation for the X2000 DITA map, and all of these keys will be resolved in the context of this map, and I won't need any additional profiling attributes. So again, the keys avoid the need for multiple conditional elements, a more elegant solution. Again, time to draw some conclusions. So we've seen how you can use a subject scheme to define control values for the profiling attributes, and how oXygen automatically detects these taxonomies and how it uses them for validation and for content completion and for editing the profiling attributes, and how you can create key references and content key references, and how you can achieve key-based conditional processing. And we've also learned how you can set a route map in oXygen for resolving key definitions. Okay, so now it's time to talk about how to customize the output you get from the DITA map, from a DITA map. So oXygen, you should probably know this, but oXygen offers this transformation scenario concept. Basically, each transformation scenario represents a possible output, and here you have all the predefined outputs, PDF, web help, and so on. Let's take, for example, the web help output and see how we can customize it. We'll click Edit. Yes, we want to duplicate it. And this is the custom scenario. So one way to customize the output is to use the parameters by providing different parameter values. And here are all the default parameters available for this type of output. And if you want a different output, if you want the output to look different, then all you have to do is give different values for these parameters. For example, we can provide here an additional CSS to get a different rendering. And I have just such a CSS. So I give a value for this. Let's also copy the CSS relative to the output. Okay, and now we apply. And this lovely green color is what my CSS changed in the default output. If let's open the CSS. So if you're not believing me. So as you can see, I'm imposing a background color, green. So that's one way to customize the output using the default parameters. The other way would be to create a custom build file that extends the functionality uh, of the default transformation. And I also have a sample build file here. So all the outputs that are being generated from data maps are generated through AND transformations, and AND transformations are driven by these build files. And what I'm doing here in this build file is I'm defining an additional parameter, and it has two possible values, false and true. And I'm importing the default build file from DITA Open Toolkit, and when my parameter is true, I just give different styling, right? For I will have a yellow background, for example. So it's just a shorthand for setting a couple of parameters. And then I just call the default targets from the DITA Open Toolkit. Of course, your custom build file could do other things like maybe publish the output on a HTTP server and so on. But this is only for demonstration purposes, so let's use this build file. Again, we will edit, we will customize the default web help output. We will go on the advanced tab, and here we have this custom build file entry, and I will select the build file that I've just presented to you. And as you've seen, this build file publishes an additional parameter. So this parameter will not appear in the default ones, so I have to create a new one. I click new, and I insert the name, and like I said, possible values are true and false. Okay, let's apply it, and now I have a yellow background. So that's how you can customize the output that you're getting from a data map file. Another scenario that can happen quite often is that maybe you have, well, normally oXygen comes with the bundled with the latest DITA Open Toolkit available at the time of its release. But sometimes you have to use a specific DITA Open Toolkit versions, maybe because you're using a plugin that is only compatible with that version, or something else. And in those cases, you want oXygen to use that particular DITA Open Toolkit distribution. And how you can do that, again, you go into the transformation scenario, and on the parameters tab you have this DITA-dir parameter. And basically this is the location to the DITA Open Toolkit that should be used for transforming your data map. And by default, this is the DITA Open Toolkit that comes bundled with oXygen. But you can specify a different Open Toolkit. You can also use editor variables if you want to have a portable solution. So we've seen how you can customize the transformation scenario, both by changing parameters, by providing custom build files, and how you can make oXygen use a different DITA Open Toolkit if that's a requirement for you. So I believe we've reached the end of this presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope that you've seen some new and interesting things. Thank you again, and if you have any questions, please ask them.
Thank you, Alex, and that was a very nice presentation, a hands-on approach of using a project which, as you probably saw, is very similar to a project in the real world, to a project that a technical writer needs to work on. Alex started the project using DITA 1.1 features, and then as he progressed, he started adding DITA 1.2 features like key references, content key references, um, in order to make the project more flexible to change. He tried to cover a lot of ground, so the presentation was a little bit lengthy, but I think he managed to cover almost everything that had a particular data value. Let's look at some questions now. We have two questions related to the to the way in which you organize data resources on disk. So questions like, should I organize my tasks in a task folder, or should I take my images and add them to the images folder? And the data specification does not make this mandatory, but you're working in a team, and this is a very useful convention of dividing your data topics in various folders just to keep track of what everybody is doing. Uh, another questions, two questions were related to the condition set, to the profiling condition set feature in oXygen. So this is not a, in the data specification. The profiling condition set is just a visually pleasing way of checking some checkboxes and having oXygen recognize that some parts of the document are filtered or not. Then in the published output, you can specify that a certain profiling condition set should be used, and oXygen will automatically create a DITAVAL file on disk, and will send that to the DITA Open Toolkit in order to process your content and obtain the right output for it. Some of you made statements like, I'm just used to working in text view and seeing the tags in the text. And you are not alone. Some writers prefer using the text view, and some prefer using the author view, and some writers just prefer switching from one to the other in order to sometimes see the XML structure. oXygen offers a lot of features for editing in the text view, and we plan in the future to also add um, a framework specialized toolbars like inserting content references, key references, and so on, also in the text view. A question about creating a custom plugin and using the integrator. So oXygen comes with a bundled DITA Open Toolkit. You can drop a plugin in that DITA Open Toolkit and run the integrator, or you can have a custom DITA Open Toolkit, copy it to another location. As Alex showed you, you can change you can point to a different DITA Open Toolkit.
So I just wanted to mention that you can just run the integrator from inside oXygen if you find that more easy.
Are there restrictions for inserting content references? Um, the usual DITA specification restrictions apply, even if oXygen is sometimes relaxed when allowing you to perform a certain action. It will probably flag you with an error, and you will be able to address the issue. What is a DITAVAL? A DITAVAL is a specific type of data resource which is used to specify profiling which should be applied on the data map, to filter the data map in order to apply um, uh, in order to obtain a certain output. Can I build the DITAVAL files in oXygen to use with the DITA Open Toolkit in Astoria for publishing? Yes, definitely. We also use the DITA Open Toolkit. Also, a profiling condition set can be exported as a DITAVAL file. Where does the custom style sheet from your custom plugin show up? Uh, this means a plugin installed in the DITA Open Toolkit, which is bundled with oXygen. Right now, oXygen does not automatically detect that a new transformation type has been added by a plugin, but you can create a transformation type which is based on an older transformation type like PDF, and then you can change the trans type parameter to in order to run your custom. Alex, it's without the dot, I think. The name is just trans type one word. So if you add the plugin to oXygen's DITA Open Toolkit, which contributes a new transformation type like I don't know, DITA to InDesign, for example, you add a new parameter called trans type with a certain value, and then you can just run a transformation scenario which will call your custom plugin. If I will just make myself the presenter again. This was the question and answer section. Again, if I didn't address a certain question, we will address them eventually when the offline webinar will be available. We have some upcoming webinars. We have a webinar about XSLT development with oXygen, the third part, which will cover debugging, profiling, and unit testing. July the 3rd. And upcoming conferences, if you want to meet us in person, you have the Congility conference, June the 26th in London. You have the Balisage conference, Montreal, Canada, on August the 5th. TICOM, November the 6th in Wiesbaden, Germany. And DITA Europe, November the 18th in Munich. Well, that's about it for now. Alex, do you have anything more to add?
Well, just to thank everybody for being here and for their interest in oXygen and in our DITA support. And perhaps we will see each other again on our next webinars. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Alex. I'll just leave the presentation open for a couple of minutes so you can still ask questions. Goodbye and thank you.